caught up. We've been talking for the past, the past few weeks about growing older and wiser. And the past couple of weeks, we really concentrated on situations where we have to share the truth or share our wisdom with someone, and we know that there's a potential for conflict as a result of our interaction with that person. And we kind of honed in on this idea of how difficult it is sometimes to share the truth with a family member, and in particular, a grown child, or maybe even a grown grandchild that they've already got ideas about how things should be, and maybe they have a family of their own. But you keep on being a parent or a grandparent, don't you? Just because they get older doesn't mean that you don't have concern for them anymore. But those situations can be a little bit tough. They can be delicate. If you see an adult child or grandchild making some bad decisions or going down a path that you know leads to trouble, well, what are you compelled to do? To step in and intervene and give them maybe some unsolicited advice. Like I said, those situations can be very difficult, and they can result in rifts in our families. For the past 2 weeks, we used Exodus 18 as our text because if you remember, it describes a situation where Jethro, who is the father-in-law of Moses, felt compelled to come to Moses and give him a little bit of fatherly advice. You'll remember that Jethro sees how overwhelmed Moses is by this responsibility that he's taken on of being pretty much the sole judge of the entire nation of Israel. He's led the Israelites out of bondage in Egypt. They have not yet set up any kind of judicial system. Moses is it. Moses is the sole interpreter of the law, so he has people coming to him, it says, from morning till evening with their problems, their disputes with one another. And Moses interprets the law, and based on his interpretations, he makes a pronouncement and helps the people settle their differences with one another. So Jethro approaches Moses with some advice on how to lighten his load. We not only see Jethro's wisdom in the advice that he gives to Moses, but we see how wise Jethro is in the way he imparts that wisdom to him. So just to wrap up the last couple of weeks, some key points that I want us to come away with as far as learning how to share our wisdom with someone when we know that there could be conflict. And I think the first thing that jumped out to me, and maybe jumped out to y'all, was that it's so important to establish a good relationship with somebody before we presume to tell them, to give them some unsolicited advice. Do you get the sense that Moses and Jethro had a good relationship with one another? It seems that they did. From some of the things that they did as they interacted with one another, we can tell that Jethro has a lot of love and respect for his son-in-law Moses, and likewise Moses has a lot of love and respect for Jethro. Now the second key point is, I think this story really shows us that one of the other important things that we need to do before we give advice to someone is that we need to make sure we understand the situation. We need to learn to be a silent observer. Now when you see a family member, especially a child, who is maybe going through a difficult time and maybe making some poor choices, we want to jump right in, don't we? All right? And sometimes we don't trouble ourselves to really try to just watch, listen, and learn before we step in and say, here's what you need to do. Because we think with maybe our age and our experience, we've been there, done that, we already know what the right answers are, but we need to take the time to step back and observe, just like Jethro did. You'll remember from last week, Jethro it didn't take him long to figure out that this situation that Moses was in was not sustainable, of him trying to handle all of these people. And yet Jethro was patient, and he sat from morning till evening watching all this unfold. So we need to be good observers. And the other thing that Jethro did, the other point that we should come away with, is that we need to remember when we're going to offer counsel to somebody, we need to ask for their perspective, and that's what Jethro did. He didn't immediately jump in and start speaking to Moses, here's what you need to do. He leads off by asking Moses, what is this you're doing? Why are these people coming to you and you're the only one here? So he gives Moses a chance to explain himself, to give his perspective before he started talking. And finally, the story that we looked at the last couple of weeks, it doesn't just help us understand what kind of approach to take when we are on the giving end of wisdom or advice, but at the end of Exodus 18, Moses demonstrates his wisdom in the approach that he takes to receiving that wisdom. So we can learn just as much from Moses about gaining wisdom as we can from Jethro about how he dispensed wisdom. Because what did Moses do? When Jethro gave him this good advice, did Moses reject it? Did he say, I already know what I'm doing? I just led an entire nation of people out of hundreds of years of bondage. You don't have to tell me what to do. No. Scripture says that he listened to Jethro, and he did everything that Jethro told him to do. So there's a lot of great stuff there in that story about not just imparting our wisdom to people, the approach that we should take in doing that, but when somebody pulls us aside and tries to give us wisdom, how to handle that situation. So now this week, to switch gears, we're going to look at another Old Testament character to help us understand that sometimes the people with whom we're trying to share our wisdom simply won't listen. More importantly, I hope this lesson is going to show us that ultimately we just got to trust God's purposes even when the people we care about are headed in the wrong way. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard yourself say, I've told them and I've told them until I'm blue in the face, but they just won't listen? If you have kids, or if you have grandkids, or if you've been married, you've probably heard yourself say that. I've told them and told them, they just won't listen. So what do we do when we try to share our wisdom with somebody and they just refuse to listen to our advice? As sound as our advice may be, what do we do? It can be extremely frustrating, and I think even more so when it is a family member, particularly a child. We get frustrated because when it's somebody you love and care about, it's hurtful, isn't it? When they won't listen to you. So if you want to turn to 1 Kings chapter 12, we're going to read verses 1 through 20 here in just a little bit, and we're going to talk about Rehoboam. You remember Rehoboam and Jeroboam, and Rehoboam was the first monarch of the kingdom of Judah after the united kingdom of Israel split off into two factions. You remember the tribes of Judah and Benjamin split off from the other 10 tribes, and that's what's documented in this little section of Scripture. So in the grand scheme of things, Rehoboam isn't a major Old Testament character in terms of how many times he's mentioned. We're certainly more familiar probably with his famous grandfather, who was King David, and his father, King Solomon. Now, excuse me, I'm sorry. My allergies are on overdrive this morning. I apologize. So Solomon, we know a good bit about Solomon, don't we? Like a lot of characters in the Bible, And like his father, David, who is my favorite Bible character, Solomon is remembered for doing a lot of really good things and also for using some extraordinarily bad judgment. And that's one of the reasons I've always liked David and characters like Solomon, because they're human to us, you know, and I can look at somebody like that and see that there's hope for me, because I think I do some good things, but I also make some really poor choices. But what do we remember? What do we remember Solomon for? We remember him for his wisdom. You recall that Solomon, God said, I'll give you anything you ask for. And Solomon was rewarded with great wisdom because he wisely chose to ask for wisdom instead of self-serving type things, like for a long life or for his enemies to be defeated. So we remember him for his great wisdom. We remember him for building the temple. Of course, David wanted to build the temple. He started collecting materials for the temple, but God said, no, that's not your job. That's for somebody else. And so Solomon was the one who built that temple. And of course, Solomon is the author of several books of the Bible. Now, however, in spite of his great wisdom, Solomon is also remembered for disobeying God and helping to introduce idol worship through his many marriages to foreign princesses. We read and see that he had around 700 wives, and as far as I know, most, if not all of them, were from surrounding countries, foreign countries. One of his wives, in fact, was Pharaoh's daughter. God had expressly forbidden the Israelites from marrying these people in these surrounding areas, such as the Ammonites, the Hittites, the Edomites, and there was a good reason. He told them, don't intermarry with them, because he said what's going to happen is they're going to import their deities and introduce those deities and idol worship into Israel. He specifically says that the Israelites will turn their hearts away from me into these foreign deities. And that's exactly what happened. It's what happened with Solomon. So because of Solomon's disobedience, God tells him in Exodus 11 that he's going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand. And he's going to give it to one of his subordinates, and that is going to be his son, Rehoboam. Exodus 11, verses 12 through 13 says, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. He's talking to Solomon. So he says, because of the love and the respect that I had for your father David, I'm not going to visit this humiliation on you until after you're dead. But your legacy will be that because of your disobedience, you're going to lose your kingdom, and I'm going to give it to your son. He says, yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David my servant and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. So God is being pretty lenient right here. Is the way I read this is he tells Solomon, because of how much he loved David, he says, I'm going to take your kingdom away from you, but you're not going to suffer that during your lifetime, and I'm not going to tear the whole thing out of your son's hand. He's still going to wind up with Judah, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. Okay, so this sets the stage for the entrance of Rehoboam. God is going to punish Solomon for his disobedience by giving the kingdom, but just a small portion of it, to his heir. So let's read 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 1 through 20, and then we'll discuss it. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all the Israelites had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. He returned from Egypt. So they sent for Jeroboam, and and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." Rehoboam answered, "Go away for 3 days, and then come back to me." So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he asked. They replied, "If today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants." Sounds like pretty good advice. But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, "What is your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" The young men who had grown up with him replied, "Tell these people who have said to you, 'Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." So 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to Rehoboam, as the king had said, "Come back to me in 3 days." The king answered the people harshly. Rejecting the advice given him by the elders, he followed the advice of the young men and said, "My father made your yoke heavy. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." So the king did not listen to the people, for this turn of events was from the Lord, to fulfill the word the Lord had spoken to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through Ahijah the Shilonite. When all Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them, they answered the king, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, O Israel. Look after your own house, David." So basically they're saying, "We're packing up and we're leaving. You can have it." So the Israelites went home. But as for the Israelites who were living in the towns of Judah, Rehoboam still ruled over them. King Rehoboam sent out Adoniram, who was in charge of forced labor, but all Israel stoned him to death. King Rehoboam, however, managed to get into his chariot and escape to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. When all the Israelites heard that Jeroboam had returned, they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel. Only the tribe of Judah remained loyal to the house of David. So now the kingdom that has been united for so long is split into two factions, and Jeroboam is in control over the 10 tribes of Israel, excluding the 2, Judah and Benjamin, which Rehoboam has now taken control of, fulfilling that prophecy that God had said Solomon is going to have his kingdom ripped away from him, and Rehoboam is going to get a small portion of it. Okay. So the Israelites, to go back to the beginning here, the Israelites have convened at Shechem, which was the capital of the northern tribes. And Rehoboam has also gone there, and he presumes to be made the king. This is, as I read it, this is just a formality. He knows he's going to become king over all of Israel, and they just have to go through the motions to coronate him as king. Not so fast though, right? Because when Jeroboam gets word that Solomon has died, he sees an opening to seize power. He sees this as his moment to go back to Israel and challenge Rehoboam. So, who is Jeroboam? To give you a little bit of backstory. During his reign, King Solomon had chosen Jeroboam to be in charge or be the superintendent over several building projects. And one of the things that Jeroboam was put in charge of was building a fortress for Solomon. So in this capacity as a leader of people, he's in charge of a lot of people, he's out amongst these laborers who are building all of these extravagant things that Solomon has set out to build. It's only natural that he would become really familiar with the widespread discontent. You can imagine people that are put under forced labor are not going to be very happy about that. So as the superintendent of these projects, Jeroboam he sees this undercurrent of discontent that's brewing under the surface with the people. Jeroboam came under the influence of the words of a prophet called Ahijah. Now, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but he began to form these conspiracies with the goal of becoming the king of the 10 northern tribes. Now, this is when Solomon is still king. So Jeroboam is stirring up this trouble already and sowing discontent because he wants to be king. So when this plot to overthrow Solomon is discovered, naturally Jeroboam has to get out of town. So he flees to Egypt, and the Pharaoh places him under his protection. And he stays there until he knows that Solomon is dead. So now that Solomon has died, Jeroboam decides, like I said before, this is his moment. This is his opening to go back to Israel and to seize power. He's going to use the unrest that he saw when he was in Israel. He's going to use that as leverage to gain that power. As I was putting this together, I was thinking that in modern times we would say that Jeroboam was the populist candidate because he knows how to turn the people to his side using the issues that they're facing to gain favor with them. So Rehoboam is now, I guess you would say, at a crossroads. He's facing a formidable opponent with Jeroboam coming back, and he has to know that his hold on power is now on the line. So, like a lot of leaders, Rehoboam is surrounded by what we would assume are wise men that are there for the purpose of giving him counsel and helping him make the best decisions, making wise decisions. So, who does he consult first? Who does Rehoboam go to and say, what do you think about this? How should I handle the people? With Jeroboam coming onto the scene and saying that if he's king, he's going to change things, what should I do? Who does he ask first? The elders, the older guys, the more experienced, wiser guys that served under his father, King Solomon. They understood that in the kingdom of God, authority, such as the authority that a king possesses, is not for elevating oneself. It's for service. It's for service to the people. And they urge him to become a servant to these people, to the Israelites. They tell Rehoboam very wisely and correctly that if he will humble himself and act as a servant to the Israelites and recognize their request, that he lighten the heavy load that his father imposed on them. They say, if you will do that, these people will be loyal to you for the rest of your life. Do you think Rehoboam, judging by his response to their advice, do you think he had already made up his mind about what he was going to do? It appears to me that he really wasn't all that interested in hearing the counsel of wise men. What he was really fishing for was affirmation. So the question is, and it's a tough question to ask ourselves, do we ever ask somebody's opinion because we already know what kind of advice they're going to give to us? I've done that a lot in my life.
Human nature.
It's human nature, yes. A lot of times we avoid asking the people that we know will tell us the blunt truth. We avoid those people and we go to people. We're facing a difficult situation. We want to know what to do. We know what we want to do. And we go to people and we ask them what their opinion is, because we already know how they're going to answer us, and that they're going to give us an answer that we want to hear. I'm reminded of something that Justin said in one of his sermons not all that long ago. He talked about a good friend will share the truth with you. A good friend will not stab you in the back, but they will stab you in the front. And we need that sometimes. But Rehoboam allows his ego and his thirst for power to cloud his judgment. And he rejects the advice of these older, wiser, more experienced men and doesn't listen to what they have urged him to do. So what does he do? Who does he go to next?
The young guns.
The young guns, yes. He asks the opinion of men who are not really wise counselors. I would say that they're just yes men, is really all they are. It's interesting. What do we notice about this second group of men? Janelle just said it really. They're the same age as Rehoboam. Rehoboam, my understanding is that when he took power, that he was about 40 years old. And I remember back when I was 40, I thought I knew everything. And now that I'm 53, I look back and I realize I didn't know anything at all. And I get to have conversations with some of y'all, and I realize I still don't know very much. I still have a long ways to go to be a wise person. But he asks the opinion of men who are basically the same age as him. And it's not so much that they're the same age, but it also says that they grew up together. So they've all had the same life experiences. They're not capable of offering a different perspective than what he's looking for, because they've all gone through the same thing. Now, sometimes that's helpful to consult somebody who's gone through the same things that you have. In some cases, that's good. But in some cases, when we're seeking wise counsel, it's best not to ask somebody who has the same amount of experience or the same experiences that we have. Okay, so Rehoboam already knows exactly how these men think, because he's grown up with them. He's been with them all of his life. They're all about the same age. He knows how they're going to answer him. The advice they give Rehoboam to be even harsher, they say, hey, don't go back and just say things are going to be the same as they were under Solomon. They say, go back and really make an impression. You tell them that you're going to be even tougher than Solomon is. So this advice that they give him, in the way I see it, in the short term, it satisfies his ego. It satisfies his desire for power. But in the long term, this advice is going to lead to his ultimate downfall. Sometimes we make the mistake of asking people for wise counsel, and it's people that think exactly like we do, and that's really hard to avoid that, I think.